Hey guys, Aesop Grim here. Welcome to the channel. I wanted to let you know that today you're supposed to be seeing an episode of my playthrough of Oblivion Remastered. You're not. We're going to commemorate. Well, I don't know how to put it. I'm not doing this as a commemoration. I'm just not in the mood to record. But it has to do with Charlie Kirk being assassinated. I wasn't a huge follower. I know of him. Most people on the right do. He had an enormous impact on Gen Z. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But, as me, myself, I just didn't follow him a whole lot. I did like his election coverage quite a lot because he was one of the people that didn't get caught up in the frenzy of emotions. He was realistic about stuff, but he wasn't my favorite person to follow. He was just like the counterweight that I used. So all that said, today's episode is going to be pretty short and sweet. Let's go ahead and let you see my display capture. If you want to know more about this, I would point you towards Dr. Steve Turley's Rumble channel. You can see the address right here. And if I remember to, I'll actually put that into the description box or maybe the first comment. I'll probably put it in the first comment so that you can click it if you're not able to read it. But this video right here, Trump declares war on terrorist left as FBI drops shocking update on Charlie's shooter, covers how the Trump administration is classifying not only the Kirk assassination, but the spate of murders that we've seen from what I call the Luciferian left, or sometimes the violent left, or sometimes the intolerant left. Now, I do want to point out for you guys, my own personal position is that I do draw a distinction between liberals, progressive liberals, and then the left. And I think it moves in that gradient. But they're all in the same camp. It's just that the left actually is evil, knows what it's doing, acts on it, and then they have control of the camp, and so they influence and guide, and they're the ones looked to as the experts and the authorities and the sources of news and information for the other two, the progressives, which are fairly close to the left, and then what I would call like your run-of-the-mill everyday liberal. So that's how those three all tie together. But Trump is declaring this spate that we've seen of violence from the left as terrorism, and that's important. He goes in and he explains, Turley does, a little bit more about why that is significant. Now, if you've never heard of Steve Turley, he is what's called a cultural anthropologist. Okay, like if you just said the word anthropologist, anthropology is the study of humanity. You know what? I didn't look this up, so I might get this wrong. But I believe it's the study of like the human skeleton, how people are built from a scientific perspective, where all that started, where it comes from, what precise elements form a bone, for example. Anthropologists are oftentimes the ones that will help to inform historians of what happened at a site. If we find like an old ancient battle site and we have a bunch of skeletons, anthropologists are the ones that can find out which pieces belong to which skeletons and then tell you how did this person die. For example, I think I like you heard me realize in real time that I'm not sure I got that right. But what I can tell you with confidence is that a cultural anthropologist studies the society of man throughout history. Kind of it's like a how we got here from there sort of thing. And obviously, with the title of doctor, Steve Turley has a PhD in cultural anthropology. He is American. He started out as a classical guitarist, actually, but his studies eventually took him to Durham, England, which is where he got his doctorates. And so he comes at things from an academic view, and he studies the political landscape from the position of someone who is looking through the lens of culture and the overall, I guess, movement of society. Where is it trending towards? Okay, so that's who Steve Turley is. And this video right here he goes into why it's significant that Trump labels this as terrorist activity, and not just the Kirk assassination, but political violence in general that we're seeing here in America. This would include, for example, what you are seeing some liberals bring up. I think her name was Melissa Hortman, the Democrat that was assassinated in Minnesota. The liberals believe that that was a Trump supporter. It was not. That guy was hired by Tim Walz. He was part of Tim Walz's government. If you dig into it, and I don't remember all the details here, so I don't want to misspeak, but I believe that he was closely affiliated with some operations over in Africa. He was a security guy, and he was involved in operations in Africa, finding people to bring in to Minnesota as refugees. If I recall correctly, I'm just trying to paint the picture that the guy was integrated. He wasn't just some Joe Schmo. He was integrated at a fairly high level of the Walz government. And there is a whole lot more to that story than just Hortman's murder. There's possible conspiracy and that this was like practice for a larger operation because Walz had aspirations and Game of Thrones style aspirations for a Senate seat. Okay, there's a whole lot of shadiness going on with that. The ultimate thing being we have an abundance of evidence that shows he was not at all a MAGA supporter. This is kind of like the left trying to point out certain messages on the recent Minnesota Catholic school shooter, the trans shooter, as trying to show that person is right wing. Also, they are not right wing. They had killed Trump. They had transvestite messaging. Anti-fascist kind of messaging stuff on their weapon. So the left is, number one, making a categorical error. They're just flat out, that's a straw man argument. They're creating it. I don't even know if that's the right fallacy. They're creating it out of thin air. It's not true. But then secondly, let's just say that it was true. They are attempting to make a false equivalency. They're trying to say, hey, if you're outraged about Kirk, but you didn't say a thing about Hortman, then you're wrong. Well, that's not the case. The right stood up and condemned that right away before we even knew any of the details. We suspected just because it fits the style of the left. That's why I call them the violent left. Charlie Kirk just got shot through the throat. Do you see any cities burning down? Every team has characteristics to it, and everybody in this country, if you really got them to tell the truth, they know exactly which side of the political aisle embraces violence. Yeah, you know exactly who it is. You just lying your face off, and we know it, right? Or you want to dodge the truth, or you want to shift blame. And anyway, I'll keep talking if you guys get the point. So this was important. This one right here was even more important. Now, this is the thing with Steve Turley. Don't get thrown off by the headlines. So this reads, breaking, FBI drops a bombshell on the identity of the shooter. And he does talk about that plenty. But the bulk of the video actually goes into the academic identification of how the left is literally, they tend to be led by psychopaths and sociopaths, and that this rolls downhill. This is an excellent video. It goes into the academic study of what's called political Ponerology. Okay. For those of you who don't know, I do have a minor in classic biblical languages, which includes Koine Greek. Now, don't get it twisted. I wasn't great at either one. It's hard. If you don't stick with it, you lose it. I do have the tools that I can relearn it if I need to, but it's been years now. But I do remember this. Poner. 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 That is the Koine or the Alexandrian or the common Greek word for evil. And it is the root word for something like, for example, pornography. Evil. Okay, so political ponerology is the study of political evilness that's applied as a methodology and ideology. That's why it's got that word. It's not poner, it's ponerology, right? This is an entire system of belief. And we have multiple studies over decades that show consistently the left throughout history, across eras and across cultures and different government types, attracts psychopaths and sociopaths into its leadership. This video, I think this is a must watch for everybody, even if you vehemently disagree. We are in times where people's minds are changing radically about various things. I mean, pick a side, right? Look, I'll give you something for me. I have questions about 9/11. Now, I was in the military when 9/11 happened. It's the defining moment of my entire career, and I went overseas with the idea of making sure America never got hit like that again. My higher ideal was to protect Iraqi children, but that's a long story, okay? But there was this idea of making sure America never got hit like that again. I voted for George W. Bush. I believed in George W. Bush. I have severe questions about that I barely even entertain because I'm a little bit concerned about what kind of can of worms that might open up. And I'm not in the same position as a lot of you. I probably know more about military operations and what it's like to be in the desert than you do. But you guys over here in the civilian population were uncovering things that I had zero time to go on. I had to choose what I believed in, and then I was inserted into a completely different environment than you, and I never got any of that knowledge. It wasn't until years later that I got a little piece here, a little piece there, a little piece there that caused me to have questions. So my whole point is that even if you're a leftist, we are in incredible times right now where a lot of things are shifting. And I'm telling you that this is not just a video with an emotional reaction. It doesn't have any of that in it. Well, there is some emotionalism in it, but it's not a hot air vitriolic take of destroy the left, because we're mad, because we tried to talk with them and now that olive branch got gunned down. It's not those things. This is an academic look at what your side of the fence looks like across multiple years. Well, I don't want to repeat myself. You heard me. And you may not believe it at all. You may laugh at it, but at least you get the info and you can put it into that little section of your brain that says, this is my BS container, right? That you probably have things like religion in and stuff like that. But you at least have that info so that if things change in the future and you have a sudden shift in ideas, you're not left adrift. You have a plausible framework. This is a really good video. It is 13 and a half minutes long, and some of that is a commercial break that he does that you can skip through. But it's a really good video. And then this one right here, breaking, Democrats are getting fired and canceled across the country. Now, this one is pretty much just about that title. That's kind of actually rare for Turley. Normally, his title, he talks about that specific event early in the first quarter or so of his video, first couple minutes, but then he platforms off of it to go into deeper things about what that means in the broader society, and he brings in other pieces of evidence to support This is why we're seeing a sea change in what people believe. I'm giving an example here. This is a hypothetical of why people are registering in Republican by twice the amount that they are in Democrats, while at the same time there's a bunch of people that are unregistering as Democrats. Right, that's what the video will actually be about. But he'll use the event to platform off of. This one here's kind of different than that. This one actually is just a video about how people are getting called out for being so calloused towards somebody's life. And he does tie in what that means in the broader scheme of things about how the culture is shifting. Okay, so there you go. There are 3 videos, all from this one guy, Dr. Steve Turley. I'll put this comment. Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to put it into the description, guys, because until this goes live, the comments won't be available. So I'll put this, I said I'll put this comment, I'll put this hyperlink into the description so you have access to his entire channel. God bless you guys. Again, I'm Aesop Grimm. Thank you for coming by the channel. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I started off earlier about how Charlie Kirk has had this outsized influence on Gen Z. This is my prediction, guys. It's just a prediction. But I think what the left saw as a huge win was actually rocket fuel for the change in culture that has been happening these past few years. We have been massively sliding back. You know, things are like a pendulum. I've used this example for like 15 years. It's not an opposite and equal reaction. When the left pushes too hard, the counter swing carries with it momentum, the momentum of grievances. I don't know if it's even just grievances. It's the idea. It's the idea of, holy smokes, we cannot allow this. And so it doesn't just swing back to the equal point that it was on the left to the right. Because it has heavier momentum, it always swings further, and then the opposite will happen. Things will go too far right, and people will be like, holy smokes, police state, you know, or whatever the tropes are with the right, you know, religious control, things like that. And it'll swing back to the left. And that's what we've been seeing as of late. And it's been picking up steam really rapidly just these past few years. What they saw as a victory for what? Like half a day. Now, I'm talking about the left and probably dipping into progressive liberals. I don't really think I see a lot of what I would call just normal, like mom and pop liberals decrying this. They're outraged also at people expressing glee over this. But the progressive liberals and certainly absolutely leftists are engaging in being excited about it. And that lasted for about half a day. And then they learned that we're in the FAFO era, and that shiznit don't fly no more. And they're finding out about that, you know. So what I am suggesting then is that because Kirk had such an outsized impact on Gen Z, these people, most of them, like the people in teaching positions, are either older Gen Z or young to middle-aged, young to mid-range millennial, and they don't have their finger on the pulse anymore. They are losing that generation really, really fast, and they have no idea that that's the case. And they're not used to it because for forever and a day, the left has kind of owned the youth. They're easily manipulated, and the left has controlled the schooling and the sources of information. They have the narratives that appeal to young people's empathy. There's the old phrase, if you're young and you're not liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're old and you're not conservative, or by the time you're older and you're not conservative, you don't have a brain. Young people don't have the life context to resist a lot of narratives that are couched in live and let live and caring and loving language. It's not until they get older that they start realizing that was all code speak, you know. But for the first time, Gen Z is the first generation in 70 years. You can go look this up. Gen Z is the first American generation in 70 years to be more conservative than the generation before it, the millennials. Now, don't misunderstand that to mean that they're conservative overall politically. They are just less, a better way to put it is less liberal than the generation before them. But if the normal matrix is that as you get older, you tend to get more conservative, if that is axiomatic, if that's a truth, then it's significant. It's a significant development that Gen Z has broken away. Within Gen Z, you can divide that between the men and the women. The women are overwhelmingly liberal and hard left, and the men are overwhelmingly conservative and pro-MAGA. But between those two, and this may piss you off, especially if you're female, I don't really care. This is the truth. You could just look at society for hundreds and thousands of years. It's just true. The women will go where the men go. They will eventually. What the men have to do is they have to find a way to be able to articulate what they're thinking and why they're thinking to the women that that causes the women to not feel threatened. Most of what the women are experiencing, the young women are experiencing with all the feminism and stuff like that, is based in it's an emotional reaction to an outsized fear that they will be squashed by the patriarchy and oppressed. That's why you see all the handmaiden stuff and things like that, you know. So women are very much fluid, and it's all based on whether they feel safe and secure. If they don't feel safe and secure, you're going to hear about it. You know, I've always thought of women as being thermometers for how well a man is acting. But so that's my prediction there, is that these people, you know, I have a phrase, the left picked a fight with the God they don't believe in, and they're finding out. This past year or so, I coined that phrase for myself back whenever the 2020 election was stolen. The past year, in the run-up to the 2024 election, I altered it, and I said the left picked a fight with the God that they don't believe in and lost everything. Because I believe that we are taking the culture back, which is bigger than taking the politics back. There's a phrase, politics are downstream from culture, and culture is downstream from religion. Well, not everybody might understand that until you begin to maybe substitute the word religion for worldview. But I'm telling you, I know it doesn't really make sense grammatically, but even atheists are religious. Ultimately, atheists will subscribe to what's called humanism. Everybody on this planet, every human being, has a belief system ingrained into them, a way of viewing the world that guides their actions and their moral choices. And those systems of belief, the classical term for that was religion. And it doesn't, so there you go, you know. So I think they made a really terrible mistake. I think Gen Z is really angry about this because Kirk had outsized influence there. And I think that if you had any hope of getting this ball game back into control on your side, you burned it right there. You made probably one of the biggest mistakes you could have ever done. It threw fuel on top of a fire that was already raging. You just had that Ukrainian girl get murdered on the train. You've had a spate of violent outlashes that have led to the right talking about how the left is embracing assassination culture. Your side is looking more and more evil every single day. And the greatest thing about this, in my opinion, you can see it in the 2024 election. You can see it in the Trump administration, is that you are losing your foot soldiers every single day. People leave you and defect to us. They don't necessarily change their values, and they don't full-throatedly embrace MAGA. They certainly don't embrace the Republican Party, and they wouldn't call themselves conservatives, but they're on our side. And Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are two examples of that, and they have done tremendous work for us. Tremendous, both of them. Even Trump is almost 80 years old. That dude was a liberal in the 80s. He didn't change his values. What's called the Overton window shifted left. That's what happened. Trump stayed right where he was at. Trump is still, Trump is going to support things that I don't necessarily think are the greatest ideas on the planet out of a sense of egalitarianism. That's a liberal position. So I think you made a critically poor move because you read the map wrong. Now, why am I speaking in those kinds of terms? If now we're starting to find out, we suspect at least that this was yet another trans activist killer. Because we have found the rifle and the bullets. There were 2 bullets left, and there was the casing from the bullet that was expended that killed Kirk, that have Antifa and trans messaging engraved into the casings. Or maybe it was into the bullets themselves. I'm not sure, but you get the point. That's a minor detail, right? Why would I be speaking in those terms earlier where I'm addressing the left overall? And whenever I'm thinking left, nothing symbolizes the left better than the deep state and the international cabal of people, of globalists that are working to remake this world into a neo-feudal system. You think that's BS? You go look it up. There's academic studies on that. I'm not the only one. There are people who are paid money to just pour into books and drill down to the finest detail and reach conclusions, and that's one of them. That's one of them. That's not me just spouting nonsense. That is held by multiple scholars. Maybe not a whole lot, but it is something that's been studied with seriousness. So the reason that I'm addressing it in this way is that I don't think that this was just a crazy liberal. There could be some overlap here because I do think that people are being socially engineered, but some people are being socially engineered and trained and equipped. That's a difference. Do you get my drift? This was a shot that was made from 200 yards out, and the person exfiltrated well. I think this was an operation. They say it was 200 to 400 yards out. I don't care what it was. If you're 200 yards out, you've been trained. You've been trained. That's not a pot shot. Just throw your pistol in the air and blindly shoot because you're face to face. That takes skill, and it takes practice, and it takes training. This person was prepared. Charlie Kirk has been on the record as saying that people were planning his serious harm for the past, I think it was couple years. I heard that the Southern Poverty Law Center actually was directly involved in trying to make one of these things happen. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but it's something I heard, right? So I just think that the left made a very serious miscalculation because they do not understand that the ground beneath them is shifting, and it's shifting harder and faster and more rapidly with each passing day. These people are being seen for who they are. They're scared and terrified. They're fighting like wolves that are cornered. And they're having to, if you look at the actual Democrat Party, they are having to appeal to the most radical side of their elements just to keep themselves in power, because increasingly that's all who's left. If you watch the DNC, if you watch Democrat lawmakers, they are increasingly hemmed in with what they can say rhetorically because their own side will blast them. And they're having to take, we've heard this talked about a lot, they're having to take the 20 side of every 80%, 20% split issue. where 80% of the population says we should go, with option A. The Democrats are being forced to take the 20% radical side of no, it should be option B. This is a tailspin. And so I think these people are in very serious trouble. They created a martyr. They misread the map. They don't understand what's going on. They don't have their finger on the pulse of Gen Z. They don't realize how outraged people are. I mean, even I was kind of stunned at how much of a torch this lit. But you got to view the right as like a dam. It sits there for hundreds and hundreds of years until one day it just all breaks apart and then the flood comes out. And I'm not calling anything into existence or making prediction there. I personally, I will tell you that I have reason to believe that I heard accurately from the Lord that this will not be a blood fight. This was years and years ago. So I don't think it's going to come down to something like a civil war. But I am saying people are out there playing with fire because they don't actually understand the depth of quicksand that they've stepped into. And I'll leave it at that. God bless Charlie Kirk and his family. We know Kirk is in a great place now. We pray that his family, in the name of Jesus Christ, will be covered and provided for the rest of their time on this earth, financially, emotionally, and psychologically, in Jesus' name. And I'll say amen on that. Again, I'm Aesop Grimm. Thank you for coming by the channel. I hope you like what you saw. More importantly, I hope all is well in your neck of the woods. And I'll see you in that next episode, which should be coming up Monday, when that happens. You guys have a wonderful weekend. TGIF.